We're on time with the tariffs, and it seems like that's moving along very rapidly. We've been mistreated very badly by many countries, not just Canada and Mexico.
Imminent US tariffs threaten a seismic shift in North American trade, potentially plunging Canada into economic turmoil with a projected 4% GDP contraction and major industries bracing for impact. As Canadian banks like Royal Bank scramble to fortify reserves with a staggering $5.6 billion buffer, the US market teeters on the brink of instability. Meanwhile, Mexico navigates these turbulent waters with a surprising steadiness, bolstered by a robust peso and strategic trade negotiations. What does this mean for the future of North American economics and global markets? Let's unpack the details. The economic stakes are high. Analysts warn that Canada's GDP could shrink by as much as 4% as industries, including manufacturing, steel, aluminum and banking, brace for the fallout. Meanwhile, Mexico, though facing its own set of challenges, appears to have a more stable outlook. The peso has remained resilient, with growing speculation that Mexico might secure a more favourable trade deal with the US than its northern neighbour. This speculation is driven by Mexico's deep ties to US supply chains, particularly in automotive manufacturing, which gives the country leverage in trade talks. The ability of Mexican manufacturers to adjust to tariff conditions more swiftly than Canadian firms has made the country a more attractive trading partner under the current US administration. The financial world isn't waiting to see how this unfolds. Canada's banking sector, anticipating increased economic instability, has taken preemptive steps. Major banks, such as the Royal Bank of Canada and Toronto Dominion Bank, have dramatically raised their loan loss provisions, with estimates placing the collective increase at 70%, or roughly $5.6 billion in the first quarter of 2025 alone. The move signals a stark acknowledgement that businesses and individuals may struggle under the weight of these tariffs. A significant number of businesses tied to exports could experience cash flow issues, potentially leading to widespread defaults, forcing banks to take defensive financial measures. On Wall Street, market reactions have been swift and volatile. Investors wary of escalating trade tensions have turned cautious. The S&P 500 has fluctuated sharply as industries tied to North American trade feel the strain. In particular, the pharmaceutical and biotech sectors, including firms like BridgeBio, have faced significant investor anxiety. Many of these firms rely on supply chains that crisscross North America, making the additional costs imposed by tariffs an immediate concern. Some analysts predict that the longer these tariffs remain in place, the more capital will shift toward companies that have successfully diversified their production bases beyond the US, Canada, and Mexico. Yet the response from Canada and Mexico isn't just economic, it's deeply political. The governments of both nations have engaged in urgent diplomatic efforts, hoping to prevent a full-blown trade war. Trump has extended a temporary 30-day reprieve, offering a narrow window for negotiations. In a bid to appease Washington, Canada has pledged to ramp up border security and crack down on fentanyl trafficking, going as far as appointing a dedicated fentanyl czar. Mexico, for its part, has committed to deploying 10,000 National Guard troops to its northern border. These moves underscore how trade and security are now inextricably linked in North American diplomacy. However, while these concessions may have delayed tariff escalation, they have not provided a clear path toward resolution, leaving Canadian and Mexican officials scrambling for longer-term solutions. Mexico, however, appears to be playing a more calculated game. Unlike Canada, which remains highly dependent on US trade, Mexico has managed to maintain a strong position. Its deep ties to American supply chains, especially in automotive manufacturing, grant it leverage in trade discussions. Some experts believe that Mexico could strike a more favourable deal with the US, leaving Canada in a weaker bargaining position. If that happens, Canada's economic and political challenges could intensify, forcing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to make tough decisions about retaliation and economic restructuring. If Canada does not secure exemptions or alternative trade opportunities, it could face long-term deindustrialization in key sectors such as automotive production, where integrated supply chains have historically driven competitiveness. So, where does this leave Canada? One option is to accelerate efforts to reduce economic dependence on the US trade. Diversification has long been a topic of discussion, but now it may become a necessity. Strengthening ties with the European Union, China, and other emerging markets could provide an alternative to the American market. Canada's participation in agreements like the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership (CPTPP) and its trade deal with the EU under CETA, Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, may prove to be invaluable lifelines in the months ahead. The feasibility of increasing trade with Asia, however, remains uncertain as tensions between China and Western allies continue to rise. At the same time, strengthening the domestic economy is another key priority. Removing interprovincial trade barriers, investing in energy infrastructure, and enhancing supply chain resilience could help mitigate the worst effects of the tariffs. However, such measures require significant government investment and structural reforms that may take years to yield results. In the short term, industries reliant on US trade will have to navigate higher costs, supply chain delays, and a shifting regulatory environment. But this isn't just about economic calculations, it's about public sentiment too. The tariffs have struck a nerve in Canada, where polling suggests that the majority of citizens view Trump's decision as an unjust economic assault. The debate over how to respond has created political divisions. Some urge Trudeau to take a hardline approach with retaliatory tariffs, while others advocate for a more measured diplomatic strategy. With elections on the horizon, Trudeau's handling of this crisis could define his legacy. Will he be seen as a leader who protected Canada's economic interests, or as one who failed to shield the country from American economic aggression? If economic conditions worsen, his approval ratings could take a serious hit, paving the way for opposition parties to campaign on promises of stronger trade policies. Meanwhile, global markets continue to watch closely. The auto industry, a crucial pillar of North American trade, is particularly vulnerable. With tariffs threatening to upend long-standing supply chains, automakers are scrambling to reassess production strategies. Some companies may shift operations to avoid tariffs altogether, while others could pass costs down to consumers, leading to higher vehicle prices in both Canada and the US. The auto industry is deeply intertwined across all three countries, and any disruption could result in significant job losses and plant closures. This instability raises a pressing question. Is the North American auto industry about to be reshaped permanently?